Good morning everyone, this is Jake, I suppose, and today we're gonna model a dice in Blender. Right, it's a relatively simple process, and some of the simple stuff that you will need is we're gonna be using object primitives, mesh primitives rather, object modifiers, and simple extrusions and transformations. So this is what we're gonna be making today, and let's just get right into it. So it's gonna create a new object. Now by default we start with our cube in Blender. That's how the factory settings are set up. Now to actually model a dice, what we need to do, using our cube, as we can see we have 6 faces, and by the end of this we're gonna have quite a few more faces. So what we need to start by doing is going into, from object mode, you go into edit mode. What I'm going to do is turn on screencast keys so you can actually see what I'm doing and the shortcuts I'm using. Right, I will be explaining them by word of mouth, but I just want you to follow as well. Now pressing tab, we're going to edit mode, and the first thing we're going to do is subdivide. Right, by default when you click subdivide once, it gives you one cut across all the axes. What we want to do is increase the number of cuts to 4, because that's how much, or that's the minimum it takes to actually make a dice with good topology. Now once that is selected, right, we are in our vertex selection mode and we want to go into our face selection mode. It makes selecting much more easier. So pressing Ctrl and Tab at the same time, you go to face selection mode, or you could actually have done it down here. Right, so right clicking is to select. Okay, and what we want to do, something to note about dice is that the parallel sides are all, if they add them up, they're equal to 7. So 1 on this side, 6 on this side, right? Let's say we're going to use 2 here, we're going to have 5 on the other side. The last one is 3. Hold on. 2, 5, 3, 4. Good. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's how you make, we're not done yet actually. That's why the first part of selecting the faces for your dice. Now what we're going to do is actually create an extrusion. But unlike our normal extrusion, you don't want to be selecting all of them and then they float along a normal or a diagonal line. What you really want to do is extrude individual, so each individual face has its own normal, or it extrudes along where the face is pointing. You're going to click extrude individual, don't move anything, you just press enter afterwards, and then the next part we're going to do is I'm going to change our pivot center. Now by default it's in median point, and that means that it's going to show all the faces. Selecting those faces, it's going to scale into one point where they all will meet. Now the pivot point, where we actually put in individual origins, each of these selected faces will scale in towards their own origin. So if we scale now, what we'll have is it's scaling in on itself, and that's good. Now that we've scaled in on ourselves, or those faces have scaled in on themselves, you're going to extrude individual just one more time, and this time you're going to carry it in just slightly, like so. Right, you just weigh how you'd want your dice to look. Essentially you don't need to carry it in that much. Now once we've done, all our faces are selected, all our faces have been extruded, right? The next part of it is adding the materials. If we go over here to the right where we have our materials tab, we have a default material. By default that's covering the entire mesh that we have there. We're going to add 2 new materials. We're just going to keep the same material there, but I want to add a new material so don't interrupt that. So I'm going to call this dice dot white, and the first thing I'm going to do, increase the white on it and the intensity of the white on it, and I'm also going to increase the hardness of the specular. That's a little shiny, dot that you see there. The next thing I'm going to do afterwards is, because our dice is somewhat reflective, I'm going to increase mirroring on here. Now this isn't actually necessary to get our final result, but if for instance we add other objects to the scene and you want to see how it kind of reflects on those objects, then you can actually put in the mirroring. Now we're going to add another material slot, because essentially our dice has more than one material. It has the white, it has the black, right? So I'm just going to borrow this same white, and this I'm going to press the plus button to add a new material. Now when I do it like this, what is going to happen is that it's going to copy the same settings from the dice.white and make a new one called dice.white.001. Essentially what I can do now with the same settings, I'm just going to change the name, something more user friendly, and change the color. Now, as you'll notice, the specular in the same way is the same hardness as the one that we had before. What I'm also going to remove though, I'm going to take down the mirroring, because right now it's a little bit too much. Just want a slight amount. I'm just going to hold shift while I'm doing that, so it kind of gives it a very slight touch. Now we're not done yet, even though we've added the black. Like I said before, the first material is usually applied or assigned to your entire model. Now because we add the new material, now we need to assign it. Now if we look here, and if we were to compare it to our real dice, essentially the black doesn't just stay there and the white just pops in. What happens is that the black goes all the way to the edge of the dice. So what we need to do is increase the number of faces that this thing is touching. So we're going to press is Control and numpad plus, or if you don't have a numpad, you could always go to select, which gives you the selection, and choose more. Okay, and that will just add more to the adjacent faces to the one that I already selected. Now we're going to assign the black to those faces. What we can see here is a really polygonic dice. I guess if you were using it from Minecraft, it would be okay. You probably wouldn't even need to extrude inside, just select the faces and that's it. Right, so the next part of this now is actually getting the dice to be a lot smoother. So we're going to our object modifiers, and we're going to add a modifier. The one that we're going to use is subdivision surface. So clicking that, you can already see that the resolution of the dice is actually being increased, but the actual mesh hasn't changed. As you can see, we still have the same amount of faces that we were working with there, but essentially we've just increased the resolution of our model here. So that one's called non-destructive modeling. It's when you don't actually play around too much with the mesh. Right, Jonathan has a lot more on Blender Cookie about that. And what we can also do is increase the shading, change the shading from flat to smooth. You can see the difference here: flat, smooth, flat, smooth. Yeah. One more thing about the dice is that the edges, although they've curved out, they're not supposed to be that sharp. So we just need to select this side and this side and that side. Just make sure all the sides are selected. Right. And that side as well. So all sides being selected, scale it in just a little so that we have much rounder looking dice. Now we just need to carry the dice up a bit, holding Control and pulling on the Z axis translation manipulator, that little arrow that points up. What we want to do is make sure that our object is resting on a plane or a surface at least. So hit spacebar. You can just type in add plane. I have mine there by default. That's one way you can add an object. The other way is pressing add up the top and choosing the plane, or you can press shift and A as the shortcut. But make sure that when you're pressing shortcuts, your mouse cursor is in the viewport, because each individual panel in Blender actually has their own shortcuts and it will differ based on where your mouse cursor is. So hit plane. I'm just going to go into edit mode and scale by 40. Press 40. S40, hit enter, press tab, and let's go into our camera mode, which is 0 on the numpad. And if you don't have that, you can always go over here and choose camera if you don't have a numpad. Now if we render this out, what we'll get is something looking like this. It's really dark, the shadowing anyway, and the whole global lighting. The one thing we want to do first of all is increase ambient occlusion. Just carry it down to about 42.42. If we render this again, what you'll get is a much lighter background, because essentially we're introducing a global light, like somewhat like sunlight, I suppose. And the next thing we want to do, if you look at it again, the shadows here are very, not exactly anti-alias so much, but rather it is, well, flat, not blurry at all. So we want to change that. What we need to do is go into our lamp settings, because you know lamps do control the way shadows look, and that's where we get our lighting from. Now the energy is fine for it. What we need to change really is the sampling rate. Now, right now sampling is at 1. If we increase that to 20, you get somewhat of a high resolution shadow, not a blurrier shadow, but a high res shadow, so that if you increase the soft size, it would look a lot better. I'm going to change that to 20, and I guess I can do it at 15. And for it to render this again, now it's going to take a little more time to render than before, because essentially when you add more, or whenever you get a high res model, you're kind of going to take a little more time to render, and it would be good if you had a good machine, relatively good machine, to kind of render it with. Now I forgot to tell you that to render is F12, right? Or you could actually go over here and hit render. Now by default, our render engine is the Blender internal render, but like I was saying before, there's actually more than one. And the reason why there's a Blender game here, because you can actually use Blender to make games. But essentially this is the dice we were talking about. It looks like I have made a mistake here. I have two number 2s which is kind of weird, but essentially you guys get the concept, and it's okay to make mistakes once in a while. It's an easy fix, right? Right here we have what? Let me just check where I went wrong. 2 to 4. We should have here is 3. Let me see if I can make that correction real quick. And it's a good thing we didn't have a high res model, because then that would be really problematic, right? I'm just going to choose extrude individual, scale it in. Right, let's just go into top view to make sure it's about the same size. Yeah, just a little more. And I'm just going to choose extrude individual one more time. Right. Assign that black. Guess what? Easy fix. Re-render that, and we're good to go. Right. Well, like I said, modeling, it really does take practice. I mean, I'm not way up there myself, because there's always something new to learn. But what I wouldn't mind if you guys tried is probably like modeling a pencil, or something simple like a spoon or a dish, or even a CD case, right? But try modeling something. Maybe you can model a domino. I mean, here in Jamaica, domino is a sport, not even a sport, a game really, that is played quite often, especially in my neighborhood, right? But you guys take care, and God be with you till we meet again. Alright, hope you enjoy the lesson and keep practicing.